The first time the Krivari ships darkened Earth's skies, humanity thought it was the end. In many ways, it was. John Winters stared up at the massive shadow cast by the Krivari command vessel hanging over the Mars colony dome. Even after 12 years of occupation, the sight still made his stomach twist. The alien ship stretched nearly 2 miles across, its dark purple hull absorbing sunlight rather than reflecting it. Thousands of small lights pulsed along its underside, each one representing a weapon capable of vaporizing the entire human settlement. "Daddy, are the monsters doing an inspection today?" Ellie asked, her small hand slipping into his. John looked down at his 8-year-old daughter. Her red hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her freckled face showed concern, but not fear. She had never known a world without Krivari rule. The thought made John's chest ache. "They're not monsters, sweetie. They're just different from us," he said, the familiar lie tasting bitter on his tongue. "And yes, Commander Zarthul is coming to check on the mining operations." Ellie nodded seriously. "Mom says I have to stay in the learning center during inspections. Your mom is right. Now run along. I'll see you at dinner." As Ellie skipped away, Lisa Winters approached from the medical facility where she worked. Her once bright blue medical uniform had faded to a pale aqua after years of washing with the colony's limited resources. "Another inspection," she said, not needing to make it a question. "Third one this month. Something's got them worried." John nodded, lowering his voice. "The power fluctuations in Sector 7. They think we're doing it on purpose." "Are we?" Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. John didn't answer. After a moment he said, "I should get to the engineering bay. Zarthul always checks there first." The Mars colony had been established 30 years before the Krivari arrived. Once it had been humanity's proudest achievement, the first permanent settlement on another world. Now it served as little more than a labor camp, mining resources that the Krivari demanded. The engineering bay hummed with nervous energy as technicians rushed to make everything perfect before the inspection. The Krivari did not tolerate imperfection. John's boss, Harold Porter, paced between workstations, his balding head shining with sweat despite the colony's always cool temperature. "Winters, double-check the oxygen recyclers. Make sure the efficiency rates are visible on the monitors. You know how they get if they have to ask for information." John nodded and moved to the control panel. The colony's life support systems were operating at only 78% efficiency. The Krivari took most of the replacement parts for their own uses. But he had learned long ago how to make the numbers show a more acceptable 85%. Small acts of deception, the only form of resistance most humans dared. The alarm sounded at exactly noon, 3 short bursts that meant all humans needed to stand at their workstations. John straightened his gray uniform and fixed his eyes forward just as everyone had been trained to do. The airlock doors slid open and Commander Zarthul entered, flanked by 4 guards. The Krivari stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in what looked like dark blue scales. Their arms ended in 4-fingered hands with retractable claws. But it was their faces that most humans found hardest to accept. Too similar to human faces with high cheekbones and deep-set eyes, but with vertical pupils like a cat's. A cruel parody of humanity. "Chief Engineer Porter," Zarthul said, his voice oddly melodic despite the threatening presence. "Your production reports show a 2% decrease since last cycle." Harold bowed slightly. "Yes, Commander. We've had some equipment failures. The dust storms last month." "Excuses do not increase production," Zarthul cut him off. "Perhaps your workers need motivation. Who is responsible for maintenance in Sector 4? Harold hesitated just a moment too long. "I am, Commander," John said, stepping forward. He could feel Lisa's eyes on him from her station at the medical monitoring panel. Zarthul turned, his vertical pupils narrowing. The engineer with the defective offspring." John's hands tightened into fists at his sides, but he kept his face neutral. The Krivari referred to all human children as offspring and considered them defective by nature. "My daughter is developing according to human standards, Commander." "How fortunate for her," Zarthul said without interest. "Your maintenance schedule is inefficient. The overseer believes humans are deliberately slowing production. The equipment is old, John explained carefully. We need new parts to— You will receive what the overseer deems necessary, Zarthul interrupted. Nothing more. As he spoke, the lights in the engineering bay flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. A common occurrence in the aging colony. But John felt his heart rate increase. Zarthul's head snapped up, his eyes following the lights. What was that? Power fluctuation, Harold said quickly. Happens all the time. The solar array. Silence. Zarthul tapped a device on his wrist and spoke in the clicking, hissing language of the Kravari. The guards immediately moved to the control panels. Step away from your stations, Zarthul ordered. All humans against the wall. The workers complied immediately, moving to line up against the far wall. John caught Lisa's eye as she joined the line. Her face was pale. Our sensors detected an energy surge consistent with unauthorized communications, Zarthul announced. You know the penalty for unauthorized communication. Death. Everyone knew the penalty was death. It was just a power surge, Harold insisted. Look at the logs. The logs show what you want them to show, Zarthul said. I am not a fool, human. The commander gestured, and his guards began moving through the engineering bay, scanning equipment with handheld devices. The minutes stretched, painfully. John could feel sweat trickling down his back. The colony's main alarm suddenly blared, a different sound from the inspection warning. This was the emergency signal. Something had gone wrong elsewhere in the colony. Zarthul's communication device chimed. He listened, his expression darkening. Secure these humans, no one leaves. He turned to exit, his guards falling in behind him except for one who remained, weapon trained on the line of workers. Through the large observation window, John could see more Kravari troops rushing across the colony's central plaza. Something was happening at the learning center. Ellie was at the learning center. The emergency alarm continued to wail. John took one step away from the wall. Stay in position, human, the guard warned, raising his weapon. From across the room, Lisa caught John's eye again. Her face showed the same realization, the same fear. Their daughter was in trouble. The minutes dragged by like hours. Finally, Zarthul returned. His usually impassive face showed what John had learned to recognize as satisfaction. We have identified the source of unauthorized communications, he announced. The rebellion ends today. He pointed at John. Bring him. Two guards seized John by the arms. Lisa cried out, moving forward, but Harold held her back. What's happening? What did I do? John demanded as they dragged him toward the door. Zarthul looked back, those vertical pupils dilating slightly. It is not what you did, human. It is what your offspring attempted to do. She was caught with a prohibited communication device. John felt the floor drop out from beneath him. No, that's impossible. She's just a child. She is a human, Zarthul corrected, and humans learn treachery young. As they pulled John from the engineering bay, the last thing he saw was Lisa's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Both of them knew what happened to humans caught with prohibited technology. The Kravari ruled by fear. And today, they would make an example of a child. John struggled against the Kravari guards as they dragged him across the colony's central plaza. The red Martian dust swirled around their feet, stirred up by the increased activity. Other colonists watched from doorways and windows, their faces showing a familiar mix of fear and relief. Fear for John, relief that it wasn't them. Where is my daughter? John demanded. His voice echoed off the curved walls of the colony dome. I want to see Ellie. Commander Zarthul walked ahead, not bothering to look back. The offspring is being questioned. The learning center came into view. More Kravari guards stood at the entrance, weapons ready. Through the clear doors, John could see children huddled together in the corner of the main room, their teacher standing protectively in front of them. But Ellie wasn't among them. The guards shoved John through a side door and into a small office. There sat Ellie on a metal chair, her legs dangling above the floor. Her face was streaked with tears, her red ponytail coming undone. A small metal device lay on the desk beside her. "Daddy," she cried, trying to run to him, but a guard held her in place. "It's okay, sweetheart," John said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Everything's going to be okay." Zarthul picked up the device. "Do you recognize this, Engineer Winters?" John stared at the small metal rectangle. It was an old communication unit from Earth, the kind that had been banned immediately after the Kravari arrived. All communication was supposed to go through approved Kravari channels. "I've never seen it before," John said truthfully. "Your offspring claims the same, yet it was found in her possession." Zarthul's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Who gave it to her?" "No one," Ellie cried. "I found it. It was in the old storage room behind the learning center. I was just looking at it." John's heart sank. The old storage areas were strictly off-limits to children. They contained remnants from before the occupation, things the Kravari had missed in their initial purge of human technology. "I didn't know what it was," Ellie continued, her small voice shaking. "I thought it was a toy." "Silence," Zarthul ordered. He turned to John. "Your offspring trespassed in a restricted area and took possession of prohibited technology. The penalty is clear." "She's 8 years old," John shouted. "She doesn't understand." "Which is why the penalty falls to her guardian," Zarthul said. "You failed to properly instruct your offspring on Kravari law." John felt a momentary relief. If they were punishing him instead of Ellie, he could handle that. "Fine. Whatever punishment you want. Just let my daughter go." The door burst open and Lisa rushed in, followed by 2 more guards trying to restrain her. "What's happening? John? Ellie?" Lisa's medical uniform was disheveled, her blonde hair falling from its neat bun. "Let them go. They've done nothing wrong." Commander Zarthul watched the family with cold eyes. "Humans must learn that actions have consequences. The offspring broke the law. The guardian failed in his duty. The punishment will serve as instruction. For all." He made a sharp gesture to his guards. One grabbed Ellie roughly by the arm, pulling her toward the door. "No!" Lisa screamed, lunging forward. A guard struck her with the butt of his weapon, sending her sprawling to the floor. "Mom!" Ellie cried, struggling against her captor. John fought with renewed strength, nearly breaking free before another guard joined to subdue him. "Don't hurt them, it's my fault. Punish me." Zarthul raised a clawed hand and everyone fell silent except for Ellie's quiet sobbing. "The penalty will be carried out immediately," the commander announced. "Public instruction benefits everyone." The guards dragged all 3 members of the Winters family back into the central plaza. By now a crowd had gathered, kept at a distance by more Kravari troops. John could see Harold Porter among them, his face ashen. In the center of the plaza, the guards forced John and Lisa to their knees. They brought Ellie to stand in front of Commander Zarthul, who addressed the crowd. "Humans of Mars Colony." His voice projected effortlessly across the open space. "Today we witnessed another act of defiance. This offspring," he pointed at Ellie, "accessed prohibited technology with intent to communicate with resistance elements." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Everyone knew there was no organized resistance on Mars. The Kravari had made sure of that years ago. "The Kravari bring order to chaos," Zarthul continued, reciting the familiar occupation mantra. "Defiance brings chaos. Chaos cannot be tolerated." John strained against his captors. "She's innocent. She's just a child who found something she didn't understand." Zarthul ignored him. "The law is clear. The penalty for unauthorized communication is death." The crowd gasped. Even after years of occupation, the Kravari's casual cruelty could still shock. "No," Lisa screamed. "She's a child. You can't." "Age is irrelevant to law," Zarthul replied. He turned to Ellie, who stood trembling before him. "Do you understand why you are being punished, offspring?" Ellie's voice was small but clear in the sudden silence. "I just wanted to see what it was. I didn't try to talk to anyone." Her tears had stopped, replaced by a strange, calm dignity that no child should have to show. Something in her innocent response seemed to give Zarthul pause. For a moment, John dared to hope. Then the commander raised his hand, revealing a small weapon. Let this serve as instruction to all humans. The laws exist for your protection. Defiance brings only pain. Wait, John roared, throwing his full weight against the guards. One stumbled, and John broke partially free, lunging toward his daughter. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Ellie, seeing her father breaking free, moved toward him instinctively. The guard nearest her, interpreting her movement as an escape attempt, raised his weapon. Lisa screamed a warning. The guard fired. A bolt of blue energy struck Ellie squarely in the chest. For a moment, her small body was outlined in brilliant blue light. Her eyes, wide with surprise more than pain, met John's, then she crumpled to the dust of the plaza. Still, silent. The plaza went completely quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Lisa's anguished wail broke the silence, a sound of such pure grief that several colonists fell to their knees in shared pain. John reached his daughter's body, cradling her in his arms. Ellie, Ellie, sweetie, wake up. His voice broke as reality crashed down on him. Please wake up. Commander Zarthul looked down at the scene with no visible emotion. The offspring moved without permission during a security operation. The guard followed protocol. He turned to address the stunned crowd. Let this be a lesson. Children must be better trained to follow directives. As if his words had broken a spell, the crowd erupted in sounds of grief and outrage. Never before had the colonists shown such open emotion in front of the Kravari. Zarthul seemed momentarily taken aback by the reaction. He gestured to his guards. Return these humans to their dwelling. Dispose of the remains according to protocol. No. Lisa crawled to John's side, touching Ellie's face with trembling fingers. You can't take her from us, you can't. But the Kravari could, and they did. As John and Lisa were dragged away from their daughter's body, something changed in Mars Colony. The fear that had ruled for so long began to give way to something else, something that had been buried deep in human hearts. Rage. That night, for the first time in the 12 years of occupation, someone painted a message on the colony's main water tank, visible to all. Remember Ellie Winters? The Kravari guards painted over it by morning. It reappeared the next night in a different place, and the next and the next. What the Kravari didn't understand was that some things cannot be erased. Not with paint, not with fear, not even with death. 6 months after Ellie's death, the Mars colony looked the same on the surface. Humans still worked the mines. Kravari ships still loomed overhead. But beneath the appearance of normal life, something had changed. John Winters was no longer an engineer. The Kravari had demoted him to basic labor, spending his days loading minerals onto transport vessels. His body had grown thinner, his face weathered by grief and hard work. The colony leadership had tried to assign him and Lisa new living quarters away from the memories of Ellie, but they had refused. Tonight, John returned home later than usual. Lisa sat at their small table, her medical tablet in front of her, but she wasn't reading it. Since Ellie's death, Lisa had thrown herself into her medical work, taking extra shifts and volunteering for the most difficult cases. The dark circles under her eyes had become permanent. You're late, she said softly as John closed the door behind him. Extra inspection. Someone sabotaged a transport loader. John didn't need to lower his voice in their home. After Ellie's death, the Kravari had stripped their quarters of all monitoring devices. A strange act that some took as respect for their grief, but John recognized as indifference. The Kravari didn't consider the Winters a threat anymore. They were broken people, or so the Kravari thought. Lisa stood and moved to the kitchen area. I saved you some dinner. She placed a bowl of synthetic protein and vegetables on the table. Then, very deliberately, she turned on the water faucet, letting it run loudly. How was your day at the medical center? John asked, his voice normal, while his hands moved in a practiced pattern, a simple sign language they had developed. Transport arriving tomorrow, his hands said. Lisa's face remained neutral. The usual, 2 broken arms from a mine collapse, some respiratory issues. Her, Hands moved quickly in response. Earth supplies. Special cargo. John nodded, eating a spoonful of food he couldn't taste. Ever since Ellie's death, food had lost all flavor for him. Harold asked about you. Said to tell you hello. That's nice of him, Lisa replied. Her hands continued their silent conversation. Meet at Storage Unit 7 midnight. This was their life now. Normal conversations for any listening ears, while their hands spoke of revolution. Later that night, when the colony lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, John and Lisa slipped out of their quarters. The Krivari maintained a curfew, but medical personnel were exempt, one of the few privileges humans still held. Lisa wore her faded blue uniform, and John walked slightly behind her, as if he were simply accompanying his wife to an emergency shift. They made their way through the shadowy corridors of the residential section. Twice they passed Krivari patrol units, but Lisa's medical clearance badge prevented any questions. Storage Unit 7 was in an older section of the colony, part of the original Mars base established before the Krivari arrival. The air smelled musty here, the ventilation systems less efficient. John used Lisa's badge to unlock the heavy door, and they slipped inside. In the darkness, John could make out several human shapes waiting for them. Harold Porter was there, along with Diane Wells from Hydroponics and Miguel Garcia from Security. Lights at 10%, Harold whispered, and the room's old lighting system responded, casting a dim glow over the gathering. John counted 12 people in total, the largest meeting of the Mars resistance cell yet. Did the shipment arrive? John asked. Harold nodded. Came in on the supply shuttle, disguised as medical equipment. He gestured to a large crate in the corner. Your Earth contact came through. The Earth contact was Alan Gregory, once a friend of John's father and now their most important ally in the growing human resistance network. While Mars colony struggled under direct Krivari oversight, Earth had more freedom of movement, more places to hide things and people. Lisa moved to the crate and used her medical override to unseal it. Inside, nestled among legitimate medical supplies, were several smaller packages wrapped in sterilization foil. Is it what we asked for? Diane asked, her voice tight with tension. Lisa carefully unwrapped one package, revealing a small device, similar to the one that had been found with Ellie, but newer, more advanced. Quantum encrypted communications, she confirmed. The Krivari won't be able to detect or decode these. What about the other thing? Miguel asked. The weapon specs? John reached deeper into the crate and removed a small data cube. Everything. Alan's team has learned about Krivari shield technology. Their ships aren't invulnerable, they have weaknesses. Harold stepped forward, his face half in shadow. We all know what happens if we're caught. After Ellie, he trailed off, glancing apologetically at John and Lisa. After Ellie, John continued firmly, they think we're broken. That's our advantage. Miguel cleared his throat. The message is spreading. On Earth, the resistance cells are growing faster than the Krivari can track them. Your daughter's name has become a password among resistance fighters. Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. What's the next step? Have 3 objectives, Harold explained, pointing to a rough map of the colony he'd spread on a crate. First, establish secure communications with all resistance cells in the solar system. Second, distribute the shield vulnerability data to Earth's hidden labs. They have the resources to develop weapons we can't build here. And third, asked Diane. Third, John said, his voice hard, we find a way to get Commander Zarthul. The room fell silent. Targeting a high-ranking Krivari official would bring severe reprisals. It's not about revenge, John added, though everyone knew that wasn't entirely true. Zarthul has the access codes to the orbital defense grid. If we can get those codes, Earth ships could approach without being automatically destroyed, Miguel finished. Lisa placed a hand on her husband's arm. It's too dangerous. We should focus on the communications network first. She's right, Harold agreed. One step at a time. The meeting continued for another hour, with assignments being distributed and plans refined. As they prepared to leave, Diane approached John with something in her hand. "I found this in the learning center," she said quietly. "The children made memory objects for Ellie. The Kravari ordered them destroyed, but I saved this one." She placed a small, crudely made clay figure in John's palm. It was a child's attempt at making a human figure with red hair. "Bobby Kane made it," Diane explained. "He was Ellie's friend." John stared at the figure, emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Thank you," he managed to say. As they left the storage unit, returning to their quarters in careful intervals to avoid suspicion, John held the clay figure tightly in his pocket. It was a reminder of what they were fighting for. Not just vengeance, but a future where children could make art without fear, where a child's innocent mistake wouldn't result in death. The next morning, Commander Zarthul's personal shuttle arrived at Mars Colony for a routine inspection. The Kravari officer walked through the colony with his usual cold efficiency, noting production numbers and resource allocation. He passed John Winters working at the loading dock, not even glancing at the human he had broken 6 months before. John kept his head down, playing the role of the defeated man. But as Zarthul walked away, John's hand closed around the communications device hidden in his pocket. The first piece of a plan that would eventually bring humanity's vengeance down upon those who had ruled by fear for too long. Across the solar system, from the mines of Mars to the hidden bunkers of Earth, humans whispered the same words to each other. "Remember Ellie Winters." And they prepared for war. 6 weeks after the secret meeting, John stood at his loading dock position watching a Kravari supply ship land. His hands moved automatically, loading crates onto the transport belt, while his mind focused on the small device in his ear. It looked like a standard communication aid that many workers use due to hearing damage from the mining equipment. In reality, it connected him to the resistance network that now spanned the entire solar system. "Earth base to Mars cell," came Alan, Gregory's voice crisp despite traveling millions of miles. "Operation First Strike begins in 30 minutes. Confirm readiness." John turned to adjust a crate using the movement to cover his whispered response. "Mars cell confirms. All personnel in position." Across the loading bay, Harold Porter gave a subtle nod. In the medical center, Lisa would be receiving the same message. Throughout the colony, 12 resistance members prepared for humanity's first coordinated attack against the Kravari. It had taken months of planning and years of suffering to reach this point. The target was a Kravari fuel processing station on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The station was lightly guarded, as the Kravari never expected humans to strike so far from Earth. More importantly, it was where the shield vulnerability data could be tested for the first time. On Earth, Dr. Samantha Miller had developed a device that could disrupt Kravari's shield harmonics, creating a brief window where their seemingly impenetrable defenses would fail. But the device had never been tested in real conditions. Until today. "Incoming transmission from Europa team," Alan's voice reported in John's ear. "Captain Frank, Rivera reports all units in position." John continued loading crates, maintaining his appearance of a broken, obedient worker. In truth, his heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. If today's operation succeeded, it would be humanity's first real blow against their oppressors. If it failed, the reprisals would be severe. Commander Zarthul had been promoted after the Ellie Winters incident, as the Kravari officially termed it. He now oversaw security for the entire Mars sector, which meant he spent less time at the HFY colony. A small mercy for John and Lisa, who no longer had to see their daughter's killer on a regular basis. But Zarthul was scheduled to return tomorrow. The timing wasn't coincidental. The Resistance wanted him to receive the news of the Europa attack while at Mars colony. They wanted to see his reaction, to gather intelligence on how the Kravari High Command would respond. 20 minutes to strike, came Alan's update. John adjusted another crate and glanced at the overhead cameras. The Kravari monitored all work areas, but Diane from Hydroponics had found a way to loop the footage for brief periods without triggering alerts. It would give John just enough time. Loop activated. Diane's voice confirmed in his ear. "You have 3 minutes." John immediately set down his loading tools and moved to a specific crate that had arrived that morning. He entered a code on its security panel, and the top slid open just enough for him to reach inside. He removed a small device about the size of his palm, with a single button in its center. This was their insurance. If the Europa attack succeeded, the Kravari would immediately boost security everywhere. This device, developed by Dr. Miller, would temporarily disable all Kravari communication systems in the colony when activated. It would give the Resistance precious minutes to destroy evidence and hide their operations if a crackdown began. John quickly attached the device to the underside of a permanent loading fixture, where it would be hidden from routine scans, tapped it twice to activate its passive mode, then returned to his workstation just as Diane's voice returned. "Loop ends in 10 seconds. Resume normal activities." By the time the cameras returned to live monitoring, John was again the picture of an obedient worker, loading crates with the dull efficiency the Kravari expected. 10 minutes to strike, Alan updated. In the colony's medical center, Lisa Winters prepared emergency supplies. The Resistance didn't expect the Kravari to attack Mars colony directly after the Europa strike, but they had to be ready for any possibility. She organized burn treatments, radiation medications, and trauma kits, all while maintaining her professional demeanor. Dr. Howard Bennett, the colony's chief medical officer and a secret Resistance member, joined her in the supply room. "Everything ready?" he asked quietly, pretending to check her inventory list. Lisa nodded. "We can treat up to 40 severe casualties if needed." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Howard's face showed the same mixture of hope and fear that all Resistance members felt today. "Any word from Earthbase?" 5 minutes to strike," Lisa whispered, answering his question. Howard squeezed her shoulder briefly before leaving to continue his rounds. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of Ellie. "This is for you, sweetheart," she whispered. Across the solar system on Europa's frozen surface, Captain Frank Rivera led a team of 20 former miners who had escaped Kravari control over the past year. They had trained in secret, using equipment smuggled from Earth's hidden factories. Now they approached the fuel processing station in stolen maintenance vehicles. 2 minutes, Frank told his team. "Shields down. Weapons check." Each team member carried a weapon developed using the vulnerability data John had helped smuggle out of Mars colony. They looked like standard mining tools but had been modified to emit an energy pulse tuned to the specific frequency that disrupted Kravari shields. 1 minute, Alan's voice came through everyone's communication devices across the solar system. "All cells stand by." In his loading bay on Mars, John paused his work for just a moment, closing his eyes and picturing Ellie's face. In the medical center, Lisa did the same. Across Earth and its colonies, thousands of Resistance members held their breath. "Strike commencing," Alan announced. On Europa, Frank's team activated their disruptor devices. For a breathless moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the shimmering energy field that had protected the Kravari facility for decades flickered and disappeared. "Shields down," Frank shouted. "Move in." His team rushed forward, firing their modified weapons at the few Kravari guards who had never faced real combat before. The aliens responded with confusion. Their confidence in their superior technology suddenly shattered. Back on Mars, John and Lisa could only listen through their hidden devices as humanity struck its first blow against the Kravari. "Main doors, breached," came Frank's excited update. "Moving to control center. Minimal resistance." Then the most beautiful words any human had heard in decades. "Kravari surrendering. I repeat, Kravari are surrendering." Throughout the Mars colony, Resistance members struggled to contain their emotions. Some turned away from cameras to hide tears of joy. Others gripped their tools tighter, channeling their excitement into their work. "Facility secured," Frank reported 20 minutes later. 6 Kravari captured. No human casualties. Downloading station data now. It had worked. For the first time since their arrival, the Kravari had been defeated in direct combat. CUD. Next morning, Commander Zarthul's shuttle arrived at Mars Colony on schedule. John watched from his loading dock position as the commander strode down the ramp, surrounded by more guards than usual. Even from a distance, John could see the tension in the Kravari's movements. News of the Europa attack had clearly reached him. Zarthul walked directly to the colony's administration building without the usual inspection. Emergency communications echoed across the Kravari frequencies, most of which the Resistance could now intercept thanks to Dr. Miller's technology. That night, the colony's human residents were confined to their quarters as Kravari troops conducted a thorough security sweep. John and Lisa sat in their small living space, outwardly calm, but inwardly jubilant. "What happens next?" Lisa asked quietly, the water running to mask their conversation. John took her hand. "We keep going. Europa was just the beginning." Lisa nodded, her eyes bright with something that had been missing since Ellie's death. Hope. Across the colony, hidden Resistance members waited out the security sweep, secure in the knowledge that their communications and equipment were too advanced for the Kravari to detect. The balance of power had shifted just slightly but significantly. The Kravari still ruled by fear. But now, humans had given them something they hadn't felt in centuries: fear of their own. 1 year after the Europa attack, the solar system was at war. The Kravari had responded to humanity's first victory with brutal crackdowns, but instead of crushing the Resistance, their actions only fueled it. Each new Kravari atrocity brought more humans to the Resistance cause. The name Ellie Winters had become a battle cry, a symbol of innocent life destroyed by alien cruelty. John and Lisa stood in the secret command center beneath Mars Colony, looking at the holographic map of the solar system. Red markers showed Kravari strongholds, while blue markers indicated human-controlled areas. Just a year ago, the map would have been almost entirely red. Now, significant blue patches appeared throughout the outer planets and asteroids. "Neptune shipyard secure," reported Harold Porter, who had become the Mars Resistance Cell leader. "That's our third major shipyard capture this month." "What about the Earth situation?" John asked. Though he had been offered leadership positions, many times he preferred to remain a field operative, directly involved in operations against the Kravari. Harold's face grew serious. "Not good. The Kravari High Command has moved their main battle fleet to Earth orbit. They're threatening to bombard major cities unless we surrender all captured territories." Lisa, who now coordinated all medical operations for the Resistance, stepped closer to the map. "They're desperate. We've never seen them make threats like this before." "They're losing," John said simply. "For the first time in their history, they're facing defeat." The door to the command center slid open, and Alan Gregory entered. The Earth Resistance leader looked tired but determined as he joined them at the map table. His visit to Mars had been risky but necessary. The Resistance leaders needed to meet in person to plan their next moves. "Dr. Miller has completed the final prototype," Alan announced without preamble. "We call it the Sun Flare." John felt a surge of hope. Samantha Miller had been working on a weapon that could turn the tide of the war completely. "It works?" Alan nodded. "Tested successfully in the Kuiper Belt, away from Kravari sensors. It creates a controlled solar flare, directed precisely at targets in space. Our ships have shielding against it. Kravari vessels don't." "How many ships can it disable?" Harold asked. "All of them," Alan replied. "The entire Kravari fleet in Earth orbit." A stunned silence fell over the room. They had been fighting for small victories, gradual progress. This was something else entirely. A chance to end the war in one decisive strike. Lisa was the first to speak. "There will be human casualties. Earth's surface shielding isn't complete. We've run the calculations," Alan said. "Major population centers are protected. Some outlying areas will experience communications disruption and minor radiation effects, but nothing permanent." John stared at the holographic image of Earth now surrounded by Kravari warships. "When?" 3 days, Alan replied. "We need to move our protected ships into position and—" He paused, looking directly at John. We need a team to infiltrate the Kravari command ship. Now John understood why Alan had come in person. You want me to lead the infiltration? It wasn't a question, but Alan nodded anyway. The Sunflare will disable their ships, but we need the command codes to prevent their automated defense systems from firing on Earth's surface. Those codes are in only one place. Zarthul's command center, John finished. Lisa grabbed her husband's arm. It's a suicide mission. Even with the Sunflare getting onto that ship and back off again. I don't need to get off again, John said quietly. I just need to get the codes. The room fell silent again. Everyone present understood what John was saying. Harold cleared his throat. We should discuss other options. There are no other options, John said firmly. And it has to be me. Later that night, in their quarters, Lisa faced her husband. I won't try to stop you, she said, tears in her eyes. But I want you to know that Ellie wouldn't want you to throw your life away even to save others. John took her hands in his. I'm not throwing my life away. I'm finishing what began when they took our daughter, and I'm not planning to die up there. Lisa managed a small smile. You're a terrible liar, John Winters. Maybe, he admitted, but I need you to believe I'm coming back. 3 days later, John sat in a stolen Kravari shuttle along with 5 other resistance fighters. They wore armor made to resemble Kravari guard uniforms, modified from suits captured in previous battles. The disguise wouldn't hold up to close inspection, but it didn't need to, just long enough to reach Zarthul's command center. Approaching Earth orbit, the pilot announced. Sunflare activates in 10 minutes. All ships confirm ready positions. Throughout the solar system, human ships had moved into specially shielded positions. On Earth's surface, people took shelter in protected bunkers, away from electronic systems that might be affected by the solar radiation. Sending recognition codes, the pilot continued, transmitting the stolen Kravari identification that would get them past the fleet's outer defenses. Codes accepted. We're through the first line. John checked his weapon one last time, a special design that could penetrate Kravari armor at close range. In his pocket, he carried a small clay figure, the crude statue of Ellie that Diane had given him over a year ago. His good luck charm. 5 minutes to Sunflare, came Alan's voice over the secure channel. All teams in position. The massive Kravari command ship grew larger in the shuttle viewport. Hundreds of Kravari vessels surrounded it, the largest fleet humanity had ever seen. In moments, most of those ships would be disabled. 2 minutes, Alan updated. John, your window will be short. Get to the command center and transmit the codes before their backup systems engage. Understood. John stood and his team formed up around him. They would fight their way to Zarthul if necessary. 1 minute. The shuttle docked with the command ship, the automated systems accepting their stolen codes. As they prepared to disembark, John thought of Lisa, of Ellie, of all that had brought him to this moment. Sunflare activating. Through the viewport, John watched as the sun seemed to pulse, a massive tendril of solar energy, invisible until it reached the edge of Earth's atmosphere, swept across space toward the Kravari fleet. Where it touched, ship systems failed instantly, lights flickering out, as the specially tuned radiation overwhelmed their technology. Go, John ordered, and his team rushed onto the command ship. The corridors were in chaos, emergency lights casting red shadows as Kravari crew members rushed to restore systems. John's team moved quickly, their disguises holding as they headed for the central command deck. When they reached the command center doors, they found them sealed by emergency protocols. 2 team members placed breaching charges while the others took defensive positions. The doors blew inward and John led the charge into the command center. Several Kravari officers reached for weapons, but the humans fired first, their specialized weapons cutting through the aliens' armor. And there, at the center of it all, stood Commander Zarthul. The Kravari officer recognized John immediately, despite the disguise. Winters, he said, his voice still calm despite the chaos around him. You should have remained broken. You made a mistake, John replied, stepping forward as his team secured the room. You killed a child and expected her parents to just accept it. One human offspring, Zarthul said dismissively, meaningless in the grand scheme. John aimed his weapon at the commander's head. Her name was Ellie Winters, and she meant everything. Zarthul's vertical pupils narrowed. Kill me if you wish, it changes nothing. The Krivari Empire spans galaxies. This defeat is temporary. Maybe, John acknowledged, but you won't be there to see what happens next. His finger tightened on the trigger, but he didn't fire. Instead, John lowered his weapon slightly. I didn't come here to kill you. I came for the defense codes. Zarthul's expression showed surprise, the first real emotion John had ever seen from the alien. You would spare me? Ellie would have, John said simply. Now give me the codes, or my team will take them from you anyway. Whether it was fear or recognition of defeat, Zarthul moved to a control panel and entered a series of commands. The automated defense grid is deactivated, he said. Earth is safe. John's team quickly verified the codes had been transmitted to the Resistance fleet. Their mission was accomplished. What now, human? Zarthul asked. Execution? John looked at the alien who had killed his daughter and changed the course of human history without even realizing it. No. You'll stand trial for what you've done. Humans don't kill children, and we don't execute prisoners. 1 month later, John and Lisa stood in the central plaza of Mars Colony, now free of Krivari control. Before them, a simple monument had been erected, not just to Ellie, but to all children who had died under Krivari rule. Lisa placed her hand on the smooth stone surface. She would be proud of what we accomplished. John nodded, looking up at the sky where human ships now patrolled instead of Krivari vessels. The war isn't over. There will be more battles. Across the solar system, humans were rebuilding, preparing for whatever came next. The Krivari Empire might return with greater forces, but humanity would be ready. They had learned the most important lesson of all. Even the most powerful enemy can be defeated when people unite against tyranny, and it had all begun with one small girl named Ellie Winters, whose death had sparked Earth's vengeance and changed the fate of 2SP.